Hello everyone out there in Wakefield. Today we've got the Wakefield Roundup video, and boy, this one's been coming for a long time. This is the first completed one in West Yorkshire, and it's had it all. From country parks to coal mines, we've seen Wakefield's varying offerings, and I have to say I've loved every minute. There's been some tough ones in this, I'm not going to lie. Most of the last 10 or so that I covered were really hard on the shoe leather. That said, the further you walk, the more you see. Here's what my routes around your part of West Yorkshire didn't catch, as always courtesy of the locals. Beginning with Ackworth. As well as the windmill at the top of Mill Hill in High Ackworth, there was also a watermill in the Mill Lane and Mill Dam area of Moorthorpe, close to where the Mill Dam Primary School is now. In 1341, the Inquisitions Nonorum noted that the only people living in Ackworth were those working in agriculture. Ackworth has had in the past an underground reservoir. Geoffrey Boycott started his cricketing career at Ackworth Cricket Club. Between Ackworth and Pontefract there's something called the Plague Stone, associated with the outbreak of the plague that affected the village in 1645. The hollow on top that now fills with rainwater was filled with vinegar at the time as disinfectant for coins left in it as payment for goods brought to the village boundary from Pontefract. St Cuthbert's and All Saints churches at Ackworth have been, or are soon to be, combined with the church at Madsworth to become a conjoined benefice according to new changes from Wakefield Council. They will stay separate ecclesiastical parishes and, of course, separate civil parishes. Next, it's Madsworth. In the 1960s, the village had a shop on the sharp corner of Main Street. The mound I filmed countryside views from is a Cold War era observation point and nuclear fallout shelter. You can see right into the centre of Leeds from there. Next is Cheviot. I have no information for this, so let's move on to Crigglestone. For Crigglestone, the house opposite what is now Durker Fisheries used to be called the Poplars, due to the massive poplar trees which framed the front garden. The back garden was huge and incorporated a large orchard and shrubbery, although sadly all this has now gone. At that time there were two pubs next door, the New Inn, which is still there, and the Foresters. Calder Grove has a well-known disused railway viaduct called Crigglestone Viaduct, which has 21 arches. It seems that the viaduct is the same former railway line that crosses the road in Middlestown in the Sitlington episode. There are in fact two bridges that cross the road in Calder Grove, the second being a metal bridge a little further south. The second line is also disused and is a former spur off an existing line into Wakefield Kirkgate, branching off just to the south of Horbury. These two lines formerly crossed each other, which on the map appears to be in the middle of nowhere to the west of Calder Grove and to the east of Netherton. Add to that, the Hallam line also runs under the viaduct here too. That's the Barnsley to Wakefield line that got a mention in the Woolley episode. Running south, the line passes under Crigglestone Viaduct before entering a tunnel that goes under Woolley Edge services. Next is Crofton. The skate park shown in the picture bit is not the one in Crofton, rather it's a generic one from a Google search. The opening sequence on Towers Lane is the border between Crofton and Charlestown, not Crofton and Huntwick with Woolby and Nostell. The building I asked about was St Joseph's Catholic Church, which opened around 1920 and closed in 2008. It was most recently used as a community space, including something called a messy church. The building on the Sidings complex is dedicated to the memory of Councillor Henry Daly, who served the village all of his working life until his death in 1995. Just behind St Joseph's Church is the old reservoir tank built to supply the lump with water. The castle on Towers Lane belonged to the Wilson family of Crofton New Hall and had a distinguished occupant at one time, Lord Strathbogie, and it was connected to the British World War I fleet. Next is Darrington. The building at 641 is the old vicarage. The house behind the phone box used to be the police house. Down Valley Road there's an old Methodist chapel and a site where a World War II bomber crashed. Darrington even had its very own crop circle in 2020. Next, it's East Hardwick. The mallet referred to in the laying of the foundation stone for St Stephen's Church at East Hardwick is in use by the Freemasons of Pontefract, as it was laid by the Marquess of Ripon, who was a Freemason. Now, there's quite a lot of information for Featherstone. The new West Yorkshire Police Headquarters is actually within Featherstone, even though it's only a stone's throw away from Normanton Industrial Estate. The remains of the gateposts of Acton Hall can be seen at the edge of the field where I was standing in one of the shots. Acton used to be called Acton, and some people still pronounce it that way. There used to be a fever hospital on the opposite side of the road from Acton Hall, which was demolished, and houses have been built in its place. North Featherstone Gospel Hall was converted into a house by Ian Clayton, the writer and broadcaster. The former pub in Street House had to close as it got struck by lightning. Number 2 Wakefield Road is opposite what used to be the town's baths. Behind the same property was a factory owned by Citra. The new houses on Stowborough Crescent replaced the old Gurnhill estate that stretched to the edge of Purston Jaglin. They were condemned around 2002 because of structural problems. It was somewhat controversial at the time, but in the end it had to be. They were in a style typical of the era they were built in. Rachel Walker sent me this photograph, which was taken at Acton Hall. It's probably the stable block, which was converted into dwellings and is now long demolished. For Havercroft with Cold Hindley. Hindley is pronounced by the locals to rhyme with fiend, although given the etymology behind the name of South Hindley, where I alluded to this and changed the way I said it, the word Hindley probably started life as Hindley, and it's evolved over the centuries. Hindley means the clearing where there are hind deer. There's lots for Hemsworth. It's important to note that the Holgate Hospital buildings shown here were built in 1859 to 1860. They're the third set of buildings that the hospital has occupied. The hospital has existed long before these were constructed. Prior to this, they were sited behind the parish church in Hemsworth in what is now Rectory Garth. The site of the first set of almshouses is not certain, but it's thought to be where Southmore Hospital once was. The buildings on Robin Lane were built in the Victorian Gothic style and originally consisted of 20 cottages, a chapel, a boardroom, a cottage for the porter and matron, and the master's house. 4 more cottages were added in 1914, and latterly a community room was added in 2015. There used to be an underground roadway linking Fitzwilliam Main Colliery Shaft to Hemsworth Pit Shaft, which was a stone's throw away from Valehead Park. That shaft was on the opposite side of the road to the park. For Hessle and Hilltop, I have no information, so let's move on. For Huntwick with Fulby and Nostell, I've only got one piece of information, and really it doesn't pertain to this parish, it pertains to Featherstone. That's because in Mill Pond Meadow, there's an abandoned house right behind the gate. Newland with Woodhouse Moor. The village which once populated this parish was made up of around 70 people until the early 1970s, when it was abandoned due to subsidence from St John's Colliery. The White House was formerly owned by a professional footballer, although the commenter didn't give me any information on who that was. There also used to be another house just before the White one along the track. Newland with Woodhouse Moor is known as the ghost town by a lot of local people who grew up on Eastmoor, due to weird occurrences which have happened over the years. Also, a lot of people who grew up in Normanton and Altofts have also reported seeing a large wolf or ape-like figure, and also a large dark entity which is known as the Conch. The proposed route of HS2 went through here until it was scrapped. As we discovered in the Normanton episode, the chimney is from the brickworks. Just to the right of the chimney, where material to manufacture bricks was extracted, that area has always flooded. Not much for Normanton. The bank turned into apartments was formerly Barclays. A part of Normanton was demolished to make way for the M62 and the Junction 31 roundabouts. A big church which never got a mention was the St John the Baptist Roman Catholic Church, which is situated just south of the Methodist Church. For North Elmsall, the Johnsons were one of the biggest landowners and had 6 farms in the area. St Mary's at South Elmsall and the beautiful little church of St Margaret's here at North Elmsall are to become one ecclesiastical parish called South and North Elmsall. Civilly, they will stay separate. One piece of information for Normanton: at the crossing where you turn right to Royston, there was a pub called the Oliver Twist. Next is Ryhill. Here are some pictures of Ryhill station platform and what's left of it, kindly sent to me by a follower. It can be seen better in winter once the vegetation and all the nettles have died back. The boundaries between Ryhill and Havercroft changed in 1930 when Mulberry Place was built, which was originally part of Havercroft, as was Royston Pit and Coke Works. On the road towards Wintersett on your left amongst the trees are lots of waterlogged ditches. They are bell pits of Saxon and monastic origin. Most of the houses down Station Road used to be pubs or shops once upon a time. The first chapel we came to in the video was the Primitive Methodist Chapel. The original building for that was the cottage across from the Liberal, built in the 1850s. The Wesleyan Methodist Chapel was originally the stone building across the road, built in 1828, and there's a large commemorative stone on the back door of the current chapel. With dwindling numbers after the war, the Methodists merged in the 1960s. Next is Charlestown. Not featured in the video is the Villa Club on Grime Lane. The empty shop that was featured was the post office until fairly recently. The lady who ran it retired and still lives there. The small convenience store now has a post office desk within it. Just the one piece of information for Sitlington: you are able to travel down the lane to Newhall Prison. You come across the prison parking and entrance, which is then followed by a small private housing development. South Elmsall, it would appear upon reflection that the library is actually in South Kirby and Moorthorpe. The name on it has clearly thrown me. The boundary between South Elmsall and Moorthorpe is formed by the Langthwaite Beck, which runs under the road, hence why the billiard hall is in South Kirby and Moorthorpe. The beck runs around the back of Rowland's Chemist. On closer inspection, St Luke's Church appears to be just in South Elmsall. The boundary swings out around the church so as to just include it. For South Hindley in Felkirk, the house that's next to the church had a very famous house guest. Oliver Cromwell stayed there on the eve of the Battle of Sandal Castle. The field referenced at the back of the houses is the property of the school. Now, South Kirby and Moorthorpe has a lot of information. The population stated at 157 was in error. Please ignore the figure of 10,979, as that is the 2001 census figure. The 2011 figure is the most recent, 11,105, and that's stated in the introduction. The Grove, the town's council base, used to be a Roman Catholic convent until the 1970s. It's referenced by Convent Avenue, one of the streets we see in the drive around. Langthwaite Grange Industrial Estate was originally opened in 1949 by the then Trade Minister Harold Wilson. The industrial estate is likely bigger than the 29,000 square feet stated, as my source may have only been referencing part of it. South Kirby Academy is a primary school and not a secondary, as was stated. On the waste ground shown at 1705, there used to be a pub/club, which became derelict and was demolished a year or two ago. It was known as MJ's, but the building was various things over the years, including a Roman Catholic club. Where Stockingate Primary School is located, there used to be a mill. Over the road was a pub known as the Swinger. Clock Row Clock was formerly the meeting point of the local hunt. There was a local clockmaker in Moorthorpe of note too. And something I forgot to mention was the priory benefice of All Saints, South Kirby, South James Ryhill, St Luke's Grimethorpe and St Paul's Brearley in this episode. One piece of information for Thorpe Audlin: I completely missed out Old Thorpe Audlin and Thorpe Manor. Next is Upton, where the co-op used to be the Green Hat pub. Locals have always said the village was in two parts, Upton and Old Upton, hence the middle being just over the railway bridge, where the old coal board repairs office used to be. The youth centre is part of what was Upton Hall Estate. It was either the stables or some other outbuilding that was extended and renovated. There was a rather gruesome murder that happened close to there involving a gun, and as a result, locals believe it to be haunted, which seems apt. To the south side of the lake in Upton Country Park, there's a disused railway line, which is now a walking path. It takes you towards Rangbrook, where you will find a very spooky tunnel, locally known as the Tunnies, that stretches a few hundred yards towards the A1. Famous comedian and footballer Charlie Williams resided in Upton. One piece of information for Walton: it doesn't have a cemetery, despite having two churches. Warmfield-cum-Heath is next. Children used to play in the ruins of Old Heath Hall, which was near to the river. Apparently you could still see the old wallpaper and huge fireplaces. They were always on the lookout for the Blue Lady, a ghost that was talked about. Different stories were told about her, including one about her being a daughter of the house who was not allowed to follow her true love, as her family didn't think he was good enough for her. The closed pub I referred to as the Paddock was renamed as such when it was turned into apartments. When it was a pub, it was called the Horse and Groom. I've got no information for West Breton, so let's move on to West Hardwick. West Hardwick once had Top Farm Museum and hosted many rallies in the 1980s. A man named Joe Duckett owned most of the land back then. I have no information for Wintersett, so to finish off, let's go to Woolley. And finally for Woolley, Haigh Village extends over to the other side of the Beck Railway and M1 into Barnsley. This is where you'll find Haigh's parish church. The Barnsley part is unparished. It split away on the 31st of March 1974. Woolley acquired the part that runs up the hill. In 1974, the Metropolitan District boundaries took precedence over the existing boundaries. As a result, Haigh was given the option to become two parishes, but because it already shared a council with Woolley, the Wakefield part of Haigh transferred to Woolley outright, leaving the Barnsley part with too small a population to form its own parish. At Halloween, Woolley Grange gets renamed Gooley Grange and all the street names turn Halloweeny. So there you have it, 1 down, 4 to go in West Yorkshire. The City of Leeds will now take Wakefield's place on a Sunday for regular videos. I'm sure a lot of you Wakefield folk know Leeds very well and will be interested in it, so stick around if you are. It's going to be another fabulous adventure. I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and this has been the City of Wakefield in West Yorkshire. And I'm out.